So yeah, I was lucky enough to be chosen to participate in Duskbloods network test, and I just got done playing through a few sessions of it, so I'd figured I'd sit down and let you know about my thoughts and first impressions on the game. So right off the bat, if you just kind of want to know if I like it or not, well, I've had a ton of fun with it so far, and I am definitely eager to play the full game and see what it has in store for us whenever it comes out. But to get to the specifics, let's start by actually talking about what Duskbloods even is, because I think a lot of people, including myself, were having a lot of trouble even understanding what this game is actually doing based on the trailers and some of the vague interviews by the developers. So I guess the most basic description is that this definitely qualifies as a battle royale. The fundamental structure of Duskbloods is that you enter the map as one of 8 players, so it's not like a huge amount of players, but it is still, I think, very battle royale coded. And over the course of 4 in-game days that each match is sort of split up into, players get eliminated one by one until you eventually get down to the final 3, and then on that last day, you straight up just have to try and kill each other in a free-for-all until one person remains, and that's who actually wins the match. But that is kind of where the comparison to more traditional Battle Royale games ends, because it does a lot of things very different from, your Fortnites and PUBGs and whatnot, and I kind of love it for that. I've always kind of had issues with a lot of the more traditional shooter-style Battle Royale games, which, to make a long story short, mostly boil down to the genre, in my opinion at least, having a little bit too much annoying RNG elements with how a lot of these games, looting mechanics work. As well as I think there's way too much downtime where you're often just running around and hiding and stuff in between the actual main shooter gameplay, which I just don't find very engaging. And I think that Duskbloods bucks a lot of these trends in how battle royales work in a way that I actually like a lot. So, like, for example, for one, the way you get eliminated in Duskbloods isn't by getting killed. In fact, you can die over and over again throughout a match, either from other players hunting you down to even just random NPCs or bosses that just, best you in combat, and you could still win the match at the end. There's no, limited number of deaths until you get to the final day. Instead, the way you get eliminated is based on a new resource called Virtue. Essentially, Virtue acts as just a universal currency that you get rewarded for doing a bunch of typical FromSoft stuff. You can kill other players to get Virtue, that's one of them, and it's called Sword Virtue, but there's lots of other ways to do it too, and whoever has the least virtue at the end of a given day is who gets eliminated. But like I said, there's lots of ways to get it, which is what makes it interesting. So, like I said, there's sword virtue, which you get from actually attacking and killing other players, but then there's also repulsion virtue, which you get from killing NPC bosses that are just kind of littered around the map. There's flame virtue, which is gained mostly through exploration, as there are these little purple corpses that are just kind of strewn about the map, and whoever is the first person to find and activate one gets just free virtue points without even having to fight anyone for them. But only the first player who finds them gets them, so it's incentivized to kind of go to where other players aren't and try to explore the map as quickly as possible. Then there's also commendation virtue, which is technically like 2 different types of virtue, with one of the players getting commendations for just killing the most NPCs. So like not even just bosses, because they're still normal like FromSoft enemies, just kind of around the map that you can kill to get experience and level up. And whoever kills the most of them gets commendation virtue for that. And then there's also one for looting items. So just literally going around looting corpses, chests, whatever, to get items. Like whoever does the most of that also gets virtue points for that. But these bonuses are also like, they only go to whoever has done the most. So if somebody like surpasses you, you can actually lose virtue because it then transfers to the other player, and then that can put you low enough that you might get eliminated in the day. So you got to be careful if you're going for these. But then there's also pledge virtue, and this one is a bit more unique because there's like a whole event surrounding how it works. So to shift topics slightly, the way that this game bucks another trend, which is the classic battle royale, circle, storm, closing in around that forces everyone into the middle, Duskbloods doesn't really do that. Instead, it kind of softly encourages players to come together in one spot on the map, because at the end of the second and third day, there is a ritual that starts at a predetermined location, so everybody knows where it's going to be, so you can kind of plan around it. And at that location, near the end of the day, there will be glowing pillars that you can go to interact with and get pledge virtue. That's where you get that type of virtue from. And you can get a lot of free virtue by just going to these towers and collecting them. It's kind of like the flame virtue, but they give you usually more at a time for each pillar that you go to. But the problem, of course, is that unlike Flame Virtue, in order to collect Pledge Virtue, you have to channel your interaction with the tower for several seconds, where you're just kind of forced to stand in one spot, doing nothing, in order to collect it. And that, of course, means that somebody can ambush you and attack you, and in most likelihood, kill you before you actually collect the virtue. Which means that not only is that person earning a sword virtue for killing you, but now they can steal the pledge virtue that you would have gotten had you finished your channeling. So naturally, this sort of special ritual area quickly devolves into a very chaotic PvP fest as people are trying to stop other people from getting to the pledge pillars, or just are showing up because that's where lots of people are, and thus it's a good way to get sword virtue. There's even two stones you can get, like a red stone and a gold stone, and if you get the red one, then you get bonus virtue for killing other players, and if you go for the gold one, you get bonus virtue from doing the pledge pillars. So you can lean into either aiming for PvP or just aiming to try and like fend them off long enough to claim the pillars for yourself. So there's a lot of like interesting mechanics going on, because like I said, there is no like storm or circle that closes in around you. So on top of being able to choose between going for more, player versus player, or trying to avoid that in the ritual, you can also just like not participate in it. Like, there's nothing that forces you to go to the ritual location. Like, it is a place where you can earn a ton of virtue, but if you don't feel confident enough in your ability to partake in that, chaotic gore fest that's going on, you can just stay out in the map and keep fighting bosses, earning flame virtue, earning virtue for killing the most NPCs, because, they're not going to be killing NPCs while they're fighting each other in the ritual. So it actually can be strategically viable to just ignore where all the players are going, because then that also means that you get to explore the rest of the map uncontested, or at least a lot less contested if most of the players are in the ritual site. So I really like how the game kind of lets you approach a lot of these different aspects in whatever way you want to go with. There are so many different approaches you can take and so many different strategies you can go for. And they all seem pretty viable in terms of winning strategies, at least as far as I can tell. But there are still other aspects to the game other than trying to get as much virtue as possible, because there are, tools and stuff that you can try to acquire that might make it easier to earn virtue in the future, even if they don't give you virtue right away, like kin and stuff. Although one thing that is interesting about this is that there isn't like normal like equipment loot, like even Night Rain, the other sort of multiplayer FromSoft game that came out recently. Like that game, you pick your character, and then when you go out to the world, you can find weapons and spells and stuff to equip, and as like traditional loot. So a lot of your build might depend on, if you find a great sword or a hammer or whatever, and you just kind of got to work with whatever moveset you're being given within the run. Whereas in this game, the characters kind of come a lot more complete in their loadout from the start of the match. And now, to be fair, I think part of this might be like a network test thing. Based on the wording of some of the abilities and whatnot, I think it is clear that you will have at least a significant degree of customization to your character's loadout. It looks at the very least like you can swap out what abilities they have, like how the basic guy can shoot out those like blood arcs or fire a laser. Like those kinds of abilities you can clearly swap out. I'm curious if you can also swap out like different weapons, or if those are locked to the character, or if maybe you could have like different like shield. Like everybody has like a blood shield they can summon. So I don't know if there's like actual shield equipment or modifiers to that. And characters also have passives, and I'm curious if they might be changeable. But either way, regardless of what you can actually customize in the full game, the point I'm getting at here is that you do all of that like loadout and equipment customization before the match begins, and then once you enter the match, your loadout is pretty much fixed until the end of that game. You know, you don't loot swords that give you a new moveset or increase your damage or anything. You only get modifiers to your weapon. So like there are these vats you can find that give you like an elemental affinity, and so it doesn't change your weapon, but it makes your weapon do like extra lightning or poison damage or things like that. But one thing you can loot that does have a pretty significant effect on your at least overall strategy, if not your specific like moveset, is the kin system, which are I think kind of the main loot. Like you can loot normal like Dark Souls style items. There are, fire bombs and poison vials and stuff that you can find on enemies and use, and they work pretty much as you would expect in most other Souls games. But the most interesting thing you can loot are these kins, which are basically like the Ashes of War summons in Elden Ring, but you get them from summoning portals, and you get a random summon every time you use them, and you can only use each portal once. So there's a lot of variety in terms of like what kinds of summons you can get, and you can't really control which ones you get, so you kind of have to play it by ear and work with what's handed to you. Although you can go to another summoning portal and just summon a new one in exchange for losing your old one, as well as I think it lowers their level or something, so like you do get kind of penalized for switching too often, but at least it gives you a way, like if you get one that you just hate, you can just go find another portal and summon a new one, but there is like a ton of variety in what you can get from these portals. One of the first ones I got was this like 10-foot tall shirtless guy who just kind of body slams people, and then when you're not in a fight, he just kind of starts singing and buffs your like resistances. I had no idea what to expect, and when he started singing, it just caught me so off guard. But yeah, then there's this tiny like gargoyle that can heal you or buff you. There's this like really upsetting, absurdly fat guy that walks around in a chariot and eats people. He's so upsetting to look at, but ironically enough, one of his abilities is literally that because of how upsetting he is, he draws more aggro from NPCs, so he kind of can act as like a frontline tank. Like, it is interesting. But yeah, it is also a very important part of the game, because like if you think about it, if you go into a PvP session and somebody wants to challenge you, well, if they have a summon and you don't, well then now it's only a 2v1, right? So like one of the most important things to do on the first day is to find a summon and then basically stick with it for the rest of the game so that you can have somebody to fight alongside you. I mean, hell, you even get to bring the summons with you into the final bout on day 4. So if you're without a summon on that day, you're basically easy pickings, because everybody else will have a summon. And so then it'll be 4 people, like 4 entities, like 2 players, 2 summons, against you by yourself. And yeah, in my experience, I had one match where I never got a summon. It didn't go well. So yeah, overall, at least mechanics-wise, the general gist of it is that it is a battle royale style game, but it's one where, ironically enough, for FromSoft, I guess, it's not really based around killing each other. You can be exploring the map and fighting bosses, gathering summons for yourself. You can even form alliances with other players, which turns off friendly fire for each other so that you can team up to fight bosses and take out other players, 4v1 or 2, depending on how many summons each side has. So it really is open-ended on how you can approach each individual match. If you prefer, PvP gameplay, you can go into it with the explicit goal of trying to hunt down enemy players and, trying to take out as many as possible to both get virtue for killing them, but also to stop them from getting their own virtue. But if you don't want to be, constantly fighting other people and you prefer a more, at least less stressful experience, you have lots of other options to score points. Although you do eventually have to engage with PvP. It is still ultimately a battle royale, and there can only be one man left standing. and the last day is just a straight up free for all between the last three players. So no matter what you do, you will eventually have to fight other people if you want to actually win a match. But there is also like a duos mode, which I'll admit I didn't try out in my time. I don't actually even know if it was available. I just saw it as an option. Um, but from what I understand, the way it works is that you actually get paired up with somebody from the start, which hopefully there'll be a way to like pair up with like specific friends or something, but who knows. But the main difference between this kind of alliance and a normal alliance is that normally when you form an alliance with somebody, when you get to the final day with the final three, all alliances are off the table and it goes back to being a free-for-all. So it doesn't matter how good friends you are with that person, you do eventually have to kill each other. But with the duos mode, you actually get to maintain the alliance in the final fight. And so you actually can, like if you do want to play a more like support or back line role, in theory, if you play duos, you might be able to do something like that and get further away from the PvP aspect, which I like. It is kind of weird to be like playing this game and not be interested in PvP at all, but I also kind of like that it is at least trying to cater to players like that who might be not as skilled at that kind of gameplay, and that I think this has a good chance of maybe reaching a wider audience because of that. But yeah, I will say this game is a lot. There's so much that is going on in the match, because like there's so much stuff I didn't even talk about. There's like, because each day can have a random modifier, so you might get like tons of extra blood sacks, or like a star might fall out of the sky, or you have to ring the clock tower. Like there's so many random things that can happen on top of all of these other mechanics. And like my first impressions when I first booted it up and was going through the tutorial, I was like, oh my god, I don't know if I can like wrap my head around this. But I will admit it was a lot easier to kind of start to understand how the game worked once I actually, kind of got into a match and started actually playing it. So it's one of those things where it's hard to really describe in a way that makes it sound simple, but like once you play it, it kind of starts to click, just kind of due to the nature of the mechanics. So at the very least, I do hope, I don't know if they could put out a demo or something, or if the network test might run for a few more weekends after this. So I do recommend at least giving it a shot to see if you might like the mechanics. One other thing I haven't touched on yet is this game has a crazy amount of mobility, at least compared to like your typical Souls game. Like honestly, the mobility in this is closer to Armored Core than it is to like Dark Souls or Elden Ring. Like even Night Rain, which like famously added a ton of mobility to the characters, where like you could sprint as fast as a horse and like double jump to climb up walls and stuff. Like that has nothing on this game. You can jump so high without needing to find like an air gust or anything, and then you can triple jump on top of that, and then you can air dash on top of that. So like I've seen some PvP fights where people just leap into the air and start flying all over the place. Like it starts looking more like a Dragon Ball Z battle than a more typical Souls duel. So like I could see how that might turn off some people who might prefer a more traditional, grounded PvP that you might get from like an older Souls or Elden Ring. Being able to suddenly leap and dash across the arena before you even touch the ground does change the dynamic a lot, but I do still think it is a lot of fun, and ultimately, it is pretty hard to actually deal damage when you're in the air until you come back down to the ground. So ultimately, most actual PvP fights do involve, actually, getting down on the ground, holding up shields, and taking swipes at each other. It's just that the air dashes and mobility and stuff kind of give you ways to escape PvP if it's going poorly, so it's kind of hard to pin people down sometimes. But that also kind of leads me into the prevalence of ranged weapons, which is, again, not unheard of in these sort of FromSoft Souls games. Bloodborne was a big one with that. But it really is, I think, emphasized pretty highly in this game. Every character comes with a melee and a ranged weapon that you always have equipped at all times. And the ranged combat is, I think, a fairly big part of how this game works. Like, you can't use the guns to parry like you could in Bloodborne, at least not that I'm aware of. But they are just kind of viable alternate ranged attacks that do not insignificant amounts of damage and stagger, especially the sniper character, who can practically use their gun as a primary weapon with how insanely long range it is. Though she does kind of suffer a lot in the final bout, since, you're locked in a small arena and you can't exactly get to high ground like a sniper wants to be. But yeah, I guess I can finish this up by just talking about the various characters I played. Well, like I said, with the sniper character, it is just very weird to see this kind of playstyle at all in a Souls game. Like I played a couple of matches where I basically just almost never used a melee weapon and I only attacked with my guns, and it's weird how viable that is. But it still feels kind of fair because of how slow the gun is, and you have to like reload after a handful of shots. And like if they're moving quickly and dodging, it's really hard to actually hit people. So I could see how maybe it could get cheap if people get really good at using her, but I don't think I mean it is the network test, so people aren't exactly super experienced yet. So who knows where that might develop. But yeah, it just is a very different playstyle. Being able to explore the map and just start taking pot shots at NPCs and one-shotting them from like 300 yards away, it's crazy. But yeah, other than her, I also played as I'm not gonna bother remembering the characters' names. I played as John Duskblood. He's like the main guy, the first one you can select with a sword and rifle, and you know he's what you would expect. He's a solid all-rounder. His rifle fires quickly, but it does a good amount of damage. And because it fires quickly, you know, if somebody's like trying to dodge you, they might dodge like a couple of the shots, but you might be able to still get them at the tail end of it. You know, so it does actually a pretty good amount of damage, and it's hard to avoid. Although it does have a much longer reload once it runs out of ammo, so there might be some opportunities to kind of get at them if they're trying to like take pot shots at you. And his abilities, at least the ones he has equipped in the network test, are again very simple but useful. He's got like a mid-range slash that can like pierce through enemies, and then his higher level ability is just a big laser that does a ton of damage. Very simple, very effective. He was pretty fun. And then the other character, which I really liked, was Pajama Sam over here with his giant axe, and because his whole gimmick is that he has a ton of lifesteal abilities, like his heavy attacks do lifesteal. He's got guard counters with lifesteal. I think he can even get lifesteal on his basic attacks with one of the upgrades. So he has a bunch of health recovery, and I'm always a fan of that style of character. I love being able to heal myself passively like that, and this was also the only character I actually won a game with during my time. So despite my misgivings about his clothing choices and the fact that he's engaging in, shoeless behavior, I mean, I must be doing something right with him. So, I do like his kit, so I hope that I can customize his appearance maybe a little bit. Also, for his gun, he actually has a spell, like he has like a flamethrower that he shoots out of his hand, which is very interesting to me because it works very differently from all of the other guns in the game. And I'm kind of curious if we can, customize our loadouts and weapons, if there might be like other spells that we can equip like that, which could make for some interesting like variety to the gameplay. So it's not just all, guns and swords, like because there's a lot of maybe utility spells you might be able to equip in your gun slot or something like that. Like that could be super interesting. But yeah, then the last character I tried out was, of course, Zork. He's the freak pick of at least of the network test. Who knows what's going to be in the full game? I did not do well with him at all when I played as him, but he is very silly, and I love him. He's a very like heavy, slow, tanky character, and he wields like a power cable that he ripped out of the ocean as his melee weapon. And then he can turn himself into a missile as one of his attacks. Like his kit is just absolutely insane. Like I said, I didn't do well with him, but I might have to try and get better with him, just because I'm always a fan of like the freak characters, and I hope that they add more like weirdos like him. Like how Night Rain had like the bird people that came out of nowhere, like I want more characters like that in this game, and I hope we get some of them. But yeah, that is. I didn't play as everybody. Those are the only characters I played of in this demo. So I figured I'd try and spend a little bit of time, trying to get to know each character and trying to get better with them, rather than spreading my time thin between all of them. So I didn't get a chance to play with all of them just yet. But I did really enjoy the characters I played. And it does seem like they offer a lot of variety, because like there's another character who's like really stealthy and has like some chakrams or something that she can throw. Not to mention, there's like a senator who can turn into a dinosaur as one of his abilities. Like, I definitely need to play as him at some point. I just, like I said, I didn't get around to it in the time that I had so far. But, overall, I had a lot of fun with it, and I'm looking forward to the full game. But, As always, I'm happy to continue the conversation in the comments down below. If anyone has any questions about the game or wants to know any more details about anything that might have been in the network test, I'll be happy to share what I know, in the comments. Just keep in mind, it is a network test. I don't know everything about the game. I don't have full access or anything, so there's a lot of unknowns that we're not going to know the answers to until the full release. But for now, if you like the video, make sure to leave me a like and hit that subscribe button if you want to see more content like this in the future. Thanks for watching. See y'all the next time.